everyone. Good evening. Welcome back. This is Caroline, your host, as always, and we are back with our first webinar of 2023. I'm glad to be back with one of our embryologists. Carolina Andrés is with us, as you can see. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's great to have you back. This is your second webinar with my IVF Fences, I remember. So glad that you were able to join us. And of course, today you will present the topic, what happens to an embryo biopsy sample from lab to the final result. And before we start, as you know, my IVF Fences, European Fertility Society, we are simply here to help you out with your questions. And of course, Carolina is the best person to answer any questions in regards to embryology. So remember, we will start with her presentation on our topic, but afterwards there will be time for your questions. So all you need to do is just put those in the chat section so that Carolina can answer them for you. Okay, so don't hesitate. Anything that's on your mind, this is your time. There will be your time there. So just go ahead and put those questions in the chat. Before we start, as always, I want to add that we are still looking for volunteers. So if you are interested and would like to help us out with some of the translations, some of the transcriptions, please get in touch with me. My email address is in the chat as well. So if you would like to help us out, go ahead and write to me. I'll be happy to give you some more details as well. And of course, as you know, we are simply here to help you out with any questions that you might have. But we also would like to let you know that, of course, we are here to not only educate, but we are also here to support you on your journeys. And we are happy to be back. And as you know, our webinars, we will start this year on Tuesdays. We will be back next Tuesday, and we will continue to bring some more webinars throughout the whole year. So thank you everyone for joining. I think that will be it from me at this point. Carolina, glad that you are here. And are you ready to begin with your presentation?
Yes, let's start. Thank you for the introduction.
Thank you so much indeed. Go ahead, this is the presentation, and let's do it. And of course, remember, if you have questions, just put those in the chat section. Thanks, and let's go ahead.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you all for assisting to this webinar today. With this presentation, I would like to guide you briefly through the journey of an embryo that has to undergo biopsy. But first, let's start with the beginning. Throughout this talk, we will cover the following content, starting with a brief description on how our laboratories are organized, a bit of embryo culture, then understanding how pre-implantation genetic testing is carried out, and finishing with the results that can be reported. At Clinica Tambre, we are a multidisciplinary team which are in continuous communication and fully coordinated. From the laboratory side, we are divided into two. The andrology laboratory, where all the procedures related to the semen analysis are carried out, and the IVF laboratory, where the oocytes are picked up, fertilized, and embryos are taken care of. In the consultation with your doctor, you will be oriented about which treatment will be the best for each individual scenario. It could be to undergo artificial insemination or IVF, and in some cases, embryogenetic diagnosis could be strongly recommended. The genetic testing can be named in different ways. It is commonly named as pre-implantation genetic testing or PGT, but you could also hear NGS. However, this term is mainly makes reference to the technique used for the analysis. Further on this presentation, I will explain this a little bit more. With the pre-implantation genetic testing, we can detect if the embryo has a correct genetic content or if it has any genetic alterations in the structure. And even in some cases, we could use it to detect if it's a carrier of a certain disease. Concerning the medical side, probably most of you will be familiarized with this scheme. Here you can see the step-by-step of an IVF cycle. With this presentation, I would like to bring you closer to what happens on day 5 of embryo culture and the following days of a PGT cycle. Instead of the transfer taking place at this point, embryo biopsy is carried out and embryos are frozen until the PGT result arrives. But let's understand how our embryos get to day 5. Regarding the laboratory side, after the egg collection, oocytes are inseminated by conventional IVF or cytoplasmic microinjection, where one sperm is introduced to each egg. At this moment, the embryo culture will begin. Embryo division will be supervised each day until the last day of embryo culture. This will be around the 5th or 6th day. It is important to note that on day 3 of the culture, we will perform a hole to the outer layer of the embryo, what is called the zona pellucida. This allows us better access to the cells that we have to biopsy. This is what we call the assisted hatching. At our clinic, we use the Gardner grading system to evaluate blastocyst quality. Only embryos with very good quality, those with letters A and B showed on the right corner of this slide, will be considered for biopsy. So here you can see the main step of the embryo biopsy. Our aim is to obtain 3 to 5 cells from the trophectoderm, that is, the outer layer of cells that is present in the embryo, to send to the genetic analysis. To do so, we will hold the cells with a biopsy pipette. These cells will be separated from the embryo itself using a laser, which does not harm the embryo. Once these cells are separated, they are going to be introduced into a tube. The embryo is frozen and they will remain in this way until they can be transferred, until we receive the result and we can see which embryo is transferred. And the cells will remain in the freezer until we send them for the genetic analysis. So after the biopsy is performed and the embryo is frozen, as I have just mentioned, the cells will remain stocked until we send them to the genetic laboratory. This normally does not take more than 2 days, unless there are any festivities in between where the cells can remain frozen as many times as they need. Once the cells are sent to the laboratory, we have to wait approximately 15 days in the case of PGTA. In the case that we have to analyze a genetic disorder, if the embryo is a carrier of a certain disease or there are structural abnormalities, this could take a little bit longer, and this will be individualized for each case, but it can take up to a month. As soon as a report is received, your coordinator would arrange a consultation with your doctor to discuss the results and the following steps to take. So what happens in the genetic laboratory? Well, as soon as they receive the cells, the DNA is extracted and it is sequenced by next generation sequencing, which is the latest technology in genetic sequencing. To make it simple, the machine reads through each chromosome and is able to detect the different abnormalities previously described. The profile that is reported by this machine, you can see it in the image in the right lower bottom. And this is analyzed by the most experienced genetic professionals, which prepare the report and send them to us. As a result, we could have 3 different scenarios. We could have euploid embryos, which are embryos which are healthy, transferable embryos that are always prioritized towards the transfer. Also, we could have aneuploid embryos, which do not have a correct genetic content and therefore must be discarded because we cannot take them into consideration for the transfer. And finally, we could have mosaic embryos. These embryos have cells with both correct and incorrect genetic content. These embryos must only be considered for transfer if no euploid embryo is available, and always after genetic counseling, where all the risks associated to the transfer of these embryos are very well explained. So thank you for attending. I'm happy to answer to any of the questions you might have.
Great. Thank you so much, Carolina, for your presentation. And of course, right now, if you have any questions, go ahead, type those in. I do see some questions already here. Okay, ready to start with the first.
Okay,
Brilliant.
sure.
Let me just go to this one. Okay, sorry. Here it is. It's regarding the non-invasive embryo testing. So do you offer this at Clinica Tambre?
Yeah, at the moment, we do not offer this kind of testing. We only do the pre-implantation genetic testing with biopsy.
The standard one, of course. Okay. And if I may ask, are there any plans to introduce that, or you don't know, at least at this
Uh,
point?
at the moment, it's something we are looking into. Definitely, it's a technique that's being developed. So we are obviously looking to it, but we're still cautious and
Of course.
and would introduce it more in the future.
Exactly. You still need to do some. There still need to be some more evidence, I guess, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
that makes sense. Of course. Thank you so much indeed. Okay, Emma has one more question. Thanks, Emma, for those. One of our embryos has been diagnosed as high risk mosaic. What are the risks of transferring this? What is the percentage of success?
So obviously, this is something that must be individualized always. And as I said, only embryos, mosaic, especially high risk mosaic embryos, can be transferred as after genetic counseling. So the genetic counselor will be the one that will explain to you much more better about the risks associated about transferring this kind of embryos and also the percentage of success.
Okay, that again makes sense. Of course, thanks for your answer. Okay, sorry, more questions are coming in. This will be
Of
a bit
course.
of a longer question. Thank you, Fran, for that. Fifth IVF ICSI cycle is underway, including PGTA because of history of live birth with rare genetic disease, age now 36, and lack of many successful embryo transfers. From this current IVF round, 24 eggs, 10 embryos, and then 3 euploids. This is good. All 3 are classified as A or high B with their history, including age. Would you recommend 1 or 2 frozen embryo transfers? Which to transfer first?
Okay, so always when we take into account the number of embryos we transfer, that's something that it has to be, that decision has to be taken with the medical team. So at our clinic, we mostly recommend to transfer 1 embryo, especially if it's a blastocyst and a euploid. And it's already diagnosed and it's euploid. So that would be our first recommendation. But obviously, each situation is different. We also have to take into consideration the background and the history of the woman and the risk of having a double pregnancy, a twin pregnancy. So that's why the decision must be made with the individual, with the medical team. Of course, which to transfer first. At the end, that's something that the laboratory normally will decide, taking into account the quality of the embryo. Obviously, that is stupid, that helps, but also on how it has developed throughout the culture of the embryo. So the one that has the best embryo culture development and the best morphological aspects would be taken into account to transfer first.
Okay. Okay, sorry, just a follow-up from Fran. Okay, I thought this could be a case for justifying 2 frozen embryo transfers.
Well, as I said, it would be that's something that's very individualized. For us, in our case, we always would recommend the transfer on 1 because we know the risks of twin pregnancies. But as I said, the doctor will be the best one to know your case very well and see if it's indicated, of course.
Okay, that's again, thanks a lot for that, Fran. If there's anything else, of course, you know what to do. Okay, there's a thank you from Fran for you as well. Okay,
Thank you.
thanks a lot. Okay, let's see. Caitlin has another question. I'd also love to hear about the new non-invasive chromosomal screening method of testing. What does the research on it say? How does it compare to PGT testing? Is it better since it doesn't damage the embryos?
Well, of course, this is a difficult question to answer in the sense that it has its pros and cons. Each technique has its benefits and its downwards. Obviously, non-invasive PGT does not damage the embryo, but it is also seen that the percentage of accuracy is not the same as the one of invasive. So we cannot really compare the techniques because in one of them we will obtain more precise information, and the other one it's more a screening, as the name it says. So the information we obtain from each technique is very different.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, if you can have a look at this, what does it mean if an embryo has PGT result of no DNA?
Well, that could be different scenarios could appear. So when we receive a result where there's a non-amplification, it could be that the quality of the cells of the embryo is not good enough. So even though the embryo has a good morphological aspect, the quality of the cells themselves could not be as good. So normally in those cases, we receive information from the PGT laboratory, and depending on what they have seen, they would recommend us to rebiopsy those embryos.
Okay. Again, thanks a lot for that. Maria has another question in regards to mosaic. Okay, so let me just go to this one.
Okay.
So, do you transfer mosaics, and have you had successful live births with mosaic embryos? Any more information you can provide on this would be really helpful.
Yes, so we have transferred mosaics, and they have led to healthy pregnancies for the moment. But obviously, you have to take into account the risks, and even though there are healthy pregnancies, we must be informed about the risks and of having a non-healthy pregnancy, of course. So the transfer of mosaic embryo is a very particular case, and as I say, the genetic counselors are the best professionals that will have more information about the chromosomes that are implied and how this could affect or the probabilities to have a certain disease in the embryo. But we have transferred already mosaic embryos.
Okay, thank you for the clarification to this question as well. I will go to the last one simply because you have, this is like a follow-up. So you mentioned if recommended, then you will test the embryos again. Can you test previously frozen embryos?
Yes, of course. So obviously there's a risk that we assume when we thaw an embryo to rebiopsy, and that's something that we have to take into account. But as normally the embryos that are being biopsied are embryos of good quality, the risk that an embryo does not survive to this process is normally low. So we do recommend thawing the embryo and rebiopsying. So we can test embryos that have been previously frozen without any problem.
Okay, thank you. What is your opinion on day 7 embryos? Can they work, and have you ever transferred them? Euploid,
Yes.
yeah, day 7 euploid embryos.
I assume yes, exactly. So yes, day 7 culture is something that we would not normally do because it is true that the aneuploidies have been seen to increase on day 7. But obviously, if we are undergoing PGT, it's a good situation where if embryos are developing slow, we could have a good opportunity to give them a little bit more time. And obviously, they are considered for biopsy, and if they are euploid at the end, we could consider transferring them. Obviously, we would prioritize embryos from day 5 or day 6, and then we could lead to go to day 7 without any problem. At the end, the genetic content is correct.
Okay, Maria has actually the question about prioritizing right here, and this might be our final question. So if you have more, go ahead, type those in, okay? Otherwise, we will be finishing, okay? But if you have more questions, go ahead, type those in. And the question is, so how do you prioritize euploid embryos for transfer? Do you prioritize to the morphology of the trophectoderm or the inner cell mass first? Also, would you prioritize the grading over the day of development?
Yes, so normally when we prioritize embryos for transfer, we take into account many aspects of the development of the embryo and also the morphological aspect. At the end, it is very important to take into account that is euploid, so that means that they have the potential of implantation, but obviously we would take into account the morphology of the embryo. So if we would have an embryo of good quality, for example, a blastocyst AA on day 6 and the one of day 5 it's BB, well, we could prioritize without any problem the one of day 6. Normally what we do is prioritize the quality of the trophectoderm in front of the inner cell mass.
Okay, Maria, I hope that helped. I believe so. Waiting simply because someone is typing, so let's give it a minute and see if we have more question. And there are no
Of course.
questions at the minute, but I do see people typing, so we need to wait. Yeah,
Yes.
here it is. Just give me a second. Yeah, no problem, Fran. You can ask anything, so we still have time. I am curious to know what the average ratio of eggs or blastocysts to euploids. I have heard that 10 eggs should, on average, reduce to 3 euploids. I know there is no absolute.
Exactly. So this depends a lot on the age of the patient. So that would vary on the age of the patient or the age of the oocytes. So as the age increases, or the age of the oocytes increases, the percentage of euploid embryos will be drastically reduced. But obviously, this is not an absolute, as you say, and we can have young patients with do not have euploid embryos, and that at the end it's a diagnosis, and that could explain previous history of that patient, the reproductive outcomes.
And just to clarify, so I mean, eggs do not all create good embryos, euploids, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Thank you, Fran. I hope that now it's more clear for you as well. How about time lapse? Do you take time lapse result into consideration?
Of course, that would be taken into the equation as well. So, not only the morphology, but also the development, how they have been developing throughout the days of culture. That's important to take into consideration as well.
Okay, thanks a lot again for the clarification. Okay, what is the average chance of euploid, the embryo with good morphology leading to an ongoing pregnancy at Clinica Tambre?
Well, as I say, these questions are very difficult to answer. I'm very sorry I cannot be very more precise on this. As I say, this depends a lot on the age of the oocyte, the age of the patient, other history of the patient, medical wise. So it's very, very difficult to say in an average because we have many scenarios.
No, of course, it's really, really tough to
Yes.
answer this kind of questions. I'm
Yes,
sure
I'm sorry.
it's all right. Of course, I think that it's understandable, indeed. And as I mentioned, looks like that was our final question. Thank you, Fran, for your questions as well. Glad to hear that
Thank
it
you.
was useful. And of course, remember that if you have more questions, there's still time. But remember that if you even have more questions, I would like to simply have some maybe consultation or more information on your particular case. Get in touch with Clinica Tambre. You can always find the link there in the chat as well. And I'm sure they will be able to give you even more details on your case. As Carolina already said, it's always about individual patients. So we always need to keep that in mind as well, right?
Of
So
course.
thank you everyone for today. It was great to be back, and I hope that we were able to help you, even if that was just like a few questions. Carolina, before we finish, anything else you would like to add?
I think no, at the end, as you said, it's very important to individualize, and any considerations for your any particular individual case, your doctor will inform you much better of your individual case scenario.
Yep. Thank you so much indeed. And let me just remind everyone that we will be back, of course. So if you join us, we will be back with next week, actually, at 6 p.m. UK time. There is another topic that we will discuss with IVF Live with Dr. Isabel Herrera. So I hope you will be able to join us. And as you know, we will be, this has been recorded. So if anyone missed any parts of this, this will be available on our website. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you will be notified that the video is uploaded. And of course, again, thanks a lot everyone for joining us tonight. Carolina, it's been great to have you back. I'm looking forward to some more events. Those topics are definitely interesting, and I think that for you it's also a way to get in touch with patients. I know that most of the time, of course, you are in the lab working,
Yeah.
so I think that hope that that was also a nice thing to do for you. So thanks a lot for today, everyone. Have a lovely
Thank you.
evening, and of course I will see you back here, I hope, on Tuesday. And of course, if you have more questions, you know what to do. You can get in touch with Clinica Tambre, and I'm sure they will be happy to help you out as well. Thank you so much indeed. Have a good night.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Good night. Bye bye.